Welcome back to The Price of Business. I am your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. People really need to be aware of their health, and there's a lot of information going on out there, particularly when it comes to gluten. We have a culture that is incredibly dependent on things like sugar and on wheat, and those aren't things that are necessarily good for the body. You know, and one of the things I've always wondered is that, if certain things are bad for anyone, are they potentially bad for everyone if done in excess? You know, and there's a book out there called Toxic Staple, and we're going to spend a little bit of time with the author of that book, Ann Sarkisian. Ann, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
Tell us a little bit about your background before we get into the book itself.
Well, for over a decade, I've poured myself into research and conferences and talking to patients and professionals, gathering stunning success stories so that I could write this book. And it all happened because my grandson was very healthy at 2, and by 5 he was a pretty compromised kid. So we figured it out, and I'm finding out now that gluten-related disorders are epidemic. They are about 30% of the population. There's over 300 symptoms and diseases linked to this thing, and there's huge research on it. And little is being done to educate our doctors. So I kind of dove into this thing and became a little bit obsessed. And I have a conscience, and I feel that people need to know about this topic. And there's just huge unawareness.
Yeah. What's interesting is that
the hazards of gluten are many, and there's millions, tens of millions of people sick because of it.
Yeah. What's interesting is that part of the problem is that the medical field gets a lot of its education thanks to everything from major drug companies that, in my opinion, have a direct interest in health issues that are created by gluten and by sugar. And hospitals and research hospitals in particular get funding from major corporations that produce things like wheat products and sugar.
Absolutely.
And so they're insulated. They are insulated and they're uninformed. Meanwhile, there's people like yourself, people who are offering alternatives that really cost a fraction of what the drugs and other treatments cost, and actually solve problems and not replace problems with new ones, which is the way I think most of the medicines out there are. And it's really is like Don Quixote chasing windmills sometimes.
Well, doing a gluten-free diet is preventative medicine. And most people wind up being able to get rid of their drugs and pharmaceuticals, And we don't seem to be terribly interested in the cause of disease, but gluten is causing enormous illness. And everybody thinks they know a little bit of something about gluten. Actually, most people think they know a lot, but they don't begin to comprehend what this thing can do.
Okay, talk a little bit about that. So obviously some people know. One of my very, very best friends has a form of Crohn's disease, and so gluten is being wiped out of his diet entirely. And he's being very, very serious about that. And he says he is actually feeling better as a result of that. But what are some of the things that are happening out there due to gluten?
Well, arthritis is a big one, and I'm hearing back from some people that their arthritis is 95% better. I heard back from a doctor who had a frozen shoulder, of all things, and 2 weeks on the diet, and it was 100% better. And she's got a big reputation in New England, and she's really helping me with my book. Osteoporosis is a big one, anemia, miscarriages, PMS, infertility issues, even schizophrenia. I did a little thing on John Nash with his accident happening recently, and schizophrenia, because he suffered for decades with that.
You're talking about the mathematician, research. the game theory expert.
I'm sorry?
The game theory expert, John Nash?
Yes.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. The Beautiful Mind for those who like movies. Yeah, absolutely. So,
and even Tom Brokaw with his multiple myeloma. Okay. I had research on that. This thing is enormous, and that's why I'm so driven. I can look at some people and say, oh my, do I have the nerve to go and talk to that mother, And I do quite often.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what ends up happening in terms of lawsuits and that type of thing over time as there becomes more and more linkage. And I wonder if we're like in the mid 1960s looking at gluten like we were, looking at cigarettes in early mid 1960s.
Absolutely. We really are. I mean, this is at the root of. It can affect any part of your body. Okay, that includes your brain and your neurons,
Right.
your tissue, your bones, your blood. There's cancer and autoimmune linked to this. And your friend with the Crohn's might want to consider getting screened for other protein antibodies that might be disturbing him, like dairy is a big one also.
Oh, yeah, he's not on the dairy anymore either. Yeah, he's being extremely cautious, and he's way more disciplined than I am. He has just really shut it all down entirely, and I'm very impressed. So, most people who do things like you do usually have, either family of origins or relationship issues that came up that drive this type of thing. Is that part of your story as well, or is it just?
Well, yes, it is, Kevin.
Yeah.
My grandson was real healthy at age 2, and by 5, he was very thin, very pale, very irritable, very hungry all the time. Bone pain, muscle pain. His stature was a little shorter than the kids in his class, and he just could be an irritable, ugly little kid. And he was so tired by 6 o'clock that we had to help him up the stairs.
Oh, that's
night.
weird.
So I just started reading, and I went crazy when I saw all this information on gluten. I thought, why didn't his doctor have a clue about this? And so then I decided to write a book, which has totally monopolized my life, but it's been an interesting adventure.
When did you write the book?
Well, I started the research, and I really did a lot of research for about 7 years from 04. So sometime at the end of that 7 years, my husband said, quit doing the research and get the book done. So meanwhile, I was collecting stories from people, success stories, and trying to get some shape to this. And so, it all came together 3 or 4 years ago. A couple years ago is when I got it out there.
Very interesting.
A year and a half.
I got a copy of it over the weekend and have spent a little bit of time with it. I'm definitely going to be finishing it up because it's really important, and it's important for me to be well versed and well read on this. And I would put gluten up there with sugar as as really like two-headed beasts.
I think it's probably one of the worst.
Yeah. And as far as Tom Brokaw, and that's the first I've heard about his cancer potentially being linked to gluten. Who else is saying this?
Nobody.
Nobody else.
Nobody else is saying this. I happen to have a really important line in my research in the book from a doctor in Europe. She's from Serbia. And I quoted her, and what she said was, it's suggested that multiple myeloma could be a more severe gluten intolerance than celiac disease.
Well, okay,
celiac is pretty bad if you have that.
So just for clarity's sake, you're not the only one. It's actually a professor in Europe, not linking it with Brokaw, but linking it with that disease that Brokaw has. And so,
well, I linked it to Brokaw's thing because I saw his program on Dateline. I actually tried getting through to him maybe a year and a half ago when I first heard. But it's tough getting through to the VIPs,
Yes, but what I'm saying is that there is a medical researcher in Europe who is linking it with that disease. Not with him, but with that disease. Very interesting.
There's maybe a half a dozen studies or so on it. Not too many.
Yeah. But it like I said, I think we're kind of like in the early 1960s when it came to cigarette smoking.
Oh, we're in the 1920s.
Well, I think we may be a little further than that. I mean, in the 1950s, they were selling cigarettes like they could, help your weight loss and stimulate you and give you more energy or even calm you down. And so I think we're a little further along in that whole process. Although there are still a lot of people, our food pyramid still includes gluten products.
Well, the biggest problem is that our doctors don't know about it, and there's no major governmental body saying, look, this is a serious situation. We need to address it. I mean, the NIH is doing just about nothing. And if somebody does do something, like I think there's one university putting a program together for doctors, I looked at their blood testing. They're not going to offer enough testing. And the very best testing is a stool test. And it's a doctor from Texas. He's not even quite recognized yet, but he's got the best test. And it saved my family because we were all negative on the blood tests.
I'm going to have to wrap it up with that. And Sarkisian, thanks so much for your time. The book, what's the website to get more information about the book?
You can go to toxicstaple.com.
Yeah, and by the way, I just encourage people to learn more about this, take control of their health. You know, I'm sitting here right now looking at the food pyramid and all kinds of things. The fact that they still put sugar, even though just a little of it, on the pyramid is mind-boggling to me. And of course, things like bread. Bread, by the way, is the foundation. The foundation of the food pyramid. And that's the epitome of crony capitalism, to be perfectly honest with you. You've got government in cahoots with large agriculture, and the two really live off of each other like parasites. And meanwhile, we're the ones that they're sucking our very life from. And so, Ann, thanks for your work, and I encourage you to keep it up.
You're very welcome. I wrote the book to empower people so they can, improve themselves. Thank you so much, Kevin.
You bet.
Appreciate it.
Check it out.
Yep.
I believe it's a very important book, and I believe that the topic deserves our attention. ToxicStaple.com. Best content here will show up over there at usdailyreview.com. While they're like it on Facebook, follow it on Twitter.
She ain't got no money, clothes,